The head of the Massachusetts State Police has now gotten into the mix regarding the possibility of a New England serial killer. We are breaking down what his very interesting comments might mean and where this investigation goes from here. Welcome to Crime and Law Stories. Well, the conversation about a possible New England serial killer has just reignited, because now we are hearing from the person who heads up the Massachusetts State Police. That is a big deal. Now, before we get into those comments and what they mean, and we'll talk about it, what am I talking about here? Well, there have been a series of deaths in the New England area, and there has been speculation that there is a connection, that there is potentially a serial killer. Let me lay it out for you. March 6th, the body of 35-year-old Paige Fannin from West Islip, New York, was recovered in the Norwalk River out in Connecticut near Main Avenue and Gristmill Road by the Norwalk Police Department scuba team and fire personnel. According to Police Lieutenant Tom Podorsky, the river was, quote, flowing rapidly due to the heavy rain overnight. Clothing and personal items were reportedly found near the bank of the river. In fact, I'll tell you, a GoFundMe was set up in Paige's memory. And it reads in part, Paige has left behind 2 amazing parents, 2 sisters, and 1 brother, along with many more family members to mourn. If you had the honor of knowing Paige, you would know how deeply she cared for who she loved. Due to the loss of someone so young, no family is ever ready for something like this. With that being said, I ask whatever you can contribute to help. Even if it's just spreading the word, would be of great appreciation from her loved ones. Next, also on March 6th, currently unidentified human remains were found by a hunter in a wooded area near Route 3 in Plymouth, Massachusetts, approximately 180 miles away from Norwalk. According to Boston 25 and Boston.com, a police report indicates that authorities found a human skull with nasal and jaw portions missing under leaves. It was reportedly green in color, appeared to be weathered. This is according to a police report per Boston.com, and also Boston 25 reported that this sparked interest from the families of 2 missing women, Sandra Crispo, who vanished 5 years before this, and Brittany McCormick, who disappeared in July of 2021. But to be clear, nothing to indicate at this point that the remains belong to either woman. Then you have the brutal killing of 58-year-old Suzanne Worms of Grayton. Her remains were found in a suitcase near the Colonel Leonard Cemetery in Connecticut on March 19th. Now, on April 25th, police announced the arrest of 68-year-old Donald Kofel, charging him with Worms's murder, tampering with evidence, improper disposal of a body. He allegedly confessed to police to killing this woman he once lived with by saying, "All right, man, I did it. I hit her in the head with a bleeping baseball bat and it cracked her bleeping head open." And by the way, when it comes to him, according to local reporting, he has since died in jail. Next, we go to March 20th. Now we go to New Haven, Connecticut. So over 150 mi away from Plymouth, 50 mi from Girton, a little over 30 mi from Norwalk. According to police, this is where the remains of 59-year-old mother Denise Leary are discovered in a wooded area, and they were reportedly in a state of advanced decay. Now, the Office of Chief Medical Examiner confirmed the body was that of Denise, and according to WFSB, Denise had been missing since September 20th, 2024. Had last been seen at her home, had been reportedly suffering from paranoid schizophrenia. Mass Live reporting, though, that the investigation has not indicated this is a homicide. March 26th, Foster, Rhode Island, almost 90 miles from New Haven, approximately 50 or so miles from Grayton, 120 mi from Norwalk for reference. The body of 56-year-old Michelle Romano was found in a wooded area 8 months after she disappeared and was reported missing by a family member. Investigators confirmed they were looking into the, quote, suspicious circumstances surrounding her death with WJAR, reporting that authorities searched a home in Warwick, Rhode Island that was thought to be the last known address of Michelle. WPRI, reporting that Michelle was considered by friends to be generous and a loving and devoted mother of 2. A Facebook group had been set up for Michelle as well. A post from April 1st reads, "Yesterday, our family received the devastating update that Michelle had been found, and we will never ever let Michelle be forgotten." And the post encourages anyone with information to reach out to the Rhode Island State Police. April 9th, unidentified human remains were found in Killingly, Connecticut, so that's less than 10 miles from Foster, over 80 miles from New Haven, a little over 40 miles from Grayton. They were found, according to ABC6, on a dead-end road by a body of water, apparently near railroad tracks. Then the next day, April 10th, Framingham, Massachusetts, 60 miles from Killingly, 60 or so miles from Foster, almost 100 miles from Girton, firefighters found human remains near the Massachusetts Turnpike. This happened while they were fighting a brush fire. Now, the DA's office indicated, quote, "The preliminary information indicates that the remains may have been there for several months. Information gathered at the scene does not indicate foul play." According to Metro West Daily News, at the time, the remains were sent over to a forensic anthropologist at the office of the chief medical examiner. You go to April 22nd. Springfield police found a woman near a bike path on the 1500 block of Hall of Fame Avenue. She was declared dead, later identified as 45-year-old Megan Meredith. Now, we have been all on top of this New England story for a while now. And the reason that we can be on top of a story like this and really break it down and bring you updates is because of the amazing support that we get from our sponsor, Morgan & Morgan. This is America's largest injury law firm. This is a firm with over 1,000 attorneys. You know why they have so many? Because they win a lot. They have recovered over $25 billion for more than 500,000 clients. In the past few months, a client in Florida received $12 million after the insurance company offered just $350,000. Pennsylvania, a client was awarded $26 million. That is 40 times the insurer's $650,000 offer. Another client in Pennsylvania received $29 million after being offered only $500,000. And even if you think your case isn't worth millions of dollars, why not just start a claim and fight for what you deserve? Morgan & Morgan makes it so simple. You can start a claim from your phone in just 8 clicks. So if you're injured, you can easily start a claim at Fourth People. COM-LC sidebar by clicking the link below or scanning the QR code on screen. Hampton County District Attorney Anthony Gallooni said 2 days later, "We understand the unease that comes with such acts of violence, and we want the community to know that each of these cases is being thoroughly investigated in close coordination with our law enforcement partners. While online conversations around these incidents continue to grow, we urge the public to be mindful of the role that social media can play in spreading fear or misinformation. Unverified claims can compromise active investigations and contribute to a sense of chaos that does not reflect the full picture." And that kind of echoes other statements that we heard from law enforcement. When, for example, the Connecticut State Police released a statement to people after the remains were found in Killingly. It said, "This investigation is in the early stages, remains active and ongoing, and there is no information at this time suggesting any connection to similar remains discoveries actively under investigation by CSP or other Connecticut law enforcement agencies. There is no known threat to the public at this time." Grayton, Connecticut police issued a statement that said in part, "Regarding references circulating on social media about incidents in the state of Rhode Island, we currently have no information connecting those events to any of the incidents in Girton." By the way, Grayton Police Chief Louis Fizereau told WTNH on April 11th, "I would tell people, don't rush to judgment." But now, as I said, we are hearing from Massachusetts State Police, the leader of the MSP, Colonel Jeffrey Noble. And this is significant because the Massachusetts State Police serves as the statewide law enforcement agency and maintains investigative, tactical, and support units throughout the Commonwealth. And what he said was published in the Boston Herald. He came out, he said there is no evidence right now about a serial killer, but that he is, quote, tracking the cases. He said, quote, "As a former homicide detective, certainly I am tracking the news of these tragic deaths. There is no evidence to indicate that there is a serial killer at the moment. Detectives are very much monitoring and tracking and aware of these cases, and certainly if we do uncover similarities or consistencies between the cases, they have our attention, for sure." So let me bring in right now retired FBI agent and attorney Bobby Chacon to make sense of what those statements mean. Bobby, good to see you. What do those statements mean? Good to see you too, Jesse. Look, at the most basic level, they mean they can't shut the door on the serial killer theory. They just can't. And that's prudent. Although you want to not panic the public. So you want to say, look, this one, we know what happened. This one, we know what happened. These, we don't know what happened. And so, as we get more cases in and we take closer looks at them, we will explore whether or not these are connected. Right now, we don't see anything. But we're not closing the door on that as a future possibility. So I think that's the key, right? Why not? They could have just dismissed it and said, look, these are all isolated incidents. We don't see a connection. But to not rule it out. Now, it's not a case where we could just say, oh, these are just online theories. These are just conspiracy theories. There's something about it. Is it the level of interest? Is it the frequency of the bodies? Is it the locations where they say there might be a 5% chance there's a connection here? Yeah. I mean, I think it's location at first. I mean, that's why we're calling it the New England, the possible potential New England, right? The New England is the geographic area. So I think at its most basic, it's a geographic area. And then, of course, then you start look at more victimology in the demographics of the victims. Women, young white women, whatever it be, you start making a list and kind of categorizing everything. And you start to see up on your big board how many matches you have. And like you said, is this a 95% match? Is this a 5% match? And at what point do we kind of push it off the board when we get an arrest? Like in one of these cases, the roommate or the housemate was arrested for it. So boom, you can kind of push that one off the board. And that's what you have to do with each passing one as you individually get it. And then you see what's left remaining and you take closer and closer and closer looks at those cases that are still up on that board, and then you try to find a similarity. What the chief said MS, what their fusion center does is what the FBI's VCAP does on a nationwide basis. And to be clear, the people that have been arrested in connection with what now could be argued to be isolated incidents, there's no evidence as of right now, at least public evidence, to suggest that they are somehow implicated or connected or responsible to the other deaths. Could that change? Maybe. But just to put a fine point on this, are you saying there might be a unit or a series of detectives, part of the MSP, who are actively, like you said, have a chalkboard looking for connections in all these cases? Or are they waiting for something to determine there's a connection? Are they going through each one of these cases in these different locations? Are they coordinating with different agencies to try to get as much information as possible? Is there, this is so juvenile to say, is there like a New England serial killer task force that's looking at all these connections right now and trying to see if there's some similarities or not? I don't think there is yet. What I think there is a loose collection of investigators and really analysts. This comes down to our criminal analysts who do this kind of work, who really dig into the details of what the investigators have come up with, because each case has its own set of investigators depending on its jurisdiction. They have detectives assigned to that case that are looking into that case specifically because every case has a perpetrator and every case needs someone directed at that perpetrator. So, and kind of block out the noise from all this other stuff. So that detective or investigator has to look at that case and chase down that perpetrator. And then you have a larger picture. And that's because the analysts kind of can put that picture together. They can keep track of what's happening in these other jurisdictions. In other cases, when it comes time, like you said, if it matures enough to where they have, so kind of like we saw the Long Island Serial Killer Task Force, where you have a task force put together. I mean, that's when I think they come out publicly and they announce that we are looking into these things as a possible serial killer. I don't think they're there yet. I don't know if they'll get there. They might, but I don't think they're there yet. I think what you have is a loose collection of analysts kind of talking to each other, and as one gets thrown off the board and another one comes on, they start looking at similarities. Why is it significant that the Massachusetts State Police, the leader of this, is making this statement? This made the news. Why is it significant that he is talking about this and talking about tracking the cases? Well, because I think back in March you had I think that was kind of when the internet caught fire on it. I think there were 2 bodies found in different locations on the same day. Victims seem like they were similar. So I think that they addressed it because I think they may have the majority, although a bunch in Connecticut and Rhode Island as well. But Massachusetts it's the biggest state. Those that state police unit I've worked with, they're top notch. And I think that took the lead on it to kind of start to address because the internet wildfire was spreading. And so I think that they needed to kind of maybe tamp that down a bit. And kind of say, hey, we're here, we're on it, we know what you're saying. We're seeing some things and we're taking a look at it so that the internet doesn't say, why aren't the police looking at this? Why isn't anybody, that I think this was a way of going, we've got this. We're aware, and maybe relax it. How rare are serial killers when we're talking about this? Obviously, people online are suggesting there has to be something here. But in your experience, how rare are serial killers, particularly ones who, if we take this situation, operating in different states, different locations, would someone have the ability to do this and dump bodies in different places? I mean, how rare is it? How do you typically see it? Well, and I only speak from the investigative point. I was looking for the perpetrator. I wasn't the profiler on these cases, although I worked with Profile, and some of them I make good friends, and I work serial killer cases. As an investigator, the experts, and I'm not one, but the experts that I follow and I talk to, the range is for anywhere from there's, on the low end, probably 30 to 40 to 50 operating serial killers in the United States at any given time. And the higher end is probably 2 to 250 operating at any given time. And so those are frightening numbers. There was an expert, I think Mr. Fox or Dr. Fox, put out these are probably not the work of one person, because when he looked at them, they were very different geographic areas and they were very different victims. But the last serial killer I worked, which was what concerns me, Israel Keys, he actually verbalized to us in the interrogations that he knew if he could keep random to his victims and random to his location, that he could get away with it for a longer time. And he got away with it for, at our estimate, about 14 or 15 years. And so he had a young girl that he killed, a 19-year-old girl in Alaska, which is where we got onto the case. And then a year before, we later found out that he killed an elderly couple, a couple in their 50s or 60s, in Vermont. So, you're talking about across the country, completely different victims, and he had done that for 14 or 15 years. So, they learn, they watch programs, they learn as law enforcement is evolving. So they are learning how to not get caught. And that's one of those unfortunate side effects of the public's interest in this stuff, is that there's more publicity, there's more programming, there's more coverage, but that also becomes a learning tool for the people out there committing these crimes. Aside from the fact that those numbers you listed out are terrifying, 30 serial killers even of itself is very scary to think about. 200 more than 200 is frightening. Does a statement from the Massachusetts State Police deter this killer to wait to maybe let me rephrase this. Does a statement from the Massachusetts State Police, assuming for the moment there is a serial killer or potential serial killers? I'm not saying that there is, but with a statement like this, the news about it, people looking into it, does it deter a killer? Does a killer change their tactics? You talked about the random nature of it. But yet, people are saying it's New England because of where all this is happening. Do they wait a period of time? I wonder if you talk about a serial killer who's not caught for quite some time, do they change up their MMO, their tactics, so they're not caught? Yes and no. I think it depends on the serial killer. I think for the most part, yes, you're right. They will kind of learn from the publicity that they're generating. And look at the Golden State Killer, right? I mean, he was in his 70s when he was arrested, so he got away with it for decades. But then we've seen, and we all know the famous cases where they get involved in the publicity. They start taunting the police. The Unabomber did that, and some others had, sent letters to police because they enjoyed the cat and mouse game with the police. And then we learned that afterwards, after they're caught and interviewed. But yeah, sometimes it does deter them. Sometimes it's a learning lesson and they change their methods, and then sometimes they actually enjoy it and lean into the publicity. So it all depends on, the profile of the person we're dealing with. Yeah. Aside from the fact that you wonder if it was one person or two people, again, I'm not suggesting that's what we have here. You do wonder if they'd have the ability to commit all these killings and dump these bodies and not leave evidence. But But you also wonder for a second about, could it possibly be that the locations of these bodies, they just happen to be these kind of specific, perhaps remote places where you can see crime or you can see where you dispose of evidence. It just happens to be, these wooded areas. It's not a connect. It's not one person, but it just happens to be something about those subject areas. I mean, that's a possibility too, right? Absolutely. It is possible that there is no serial killer, that every single one of these cases is explainable. Especially when you look at how many young women go missing in this country every day, every week, every month. Those numbers are staggering. Those numbers are frightening. Of course, a lot of those are runaways, whatever. There's explanations for them. But when you look at the overall numbers of how many young women go missing in this country, it's kind of an epidemic. And so, the fact that a bunch of victims are found in the same geographic area around the same time doesn't necessarily mean that the same person is responsible for all of those. And we're starting to see that. We're starting to see the state police come out and say, look, we understand this one. We've made an arrest. We know what happened there. It was a domestic thing or whatever the case may be. And that person had a particular beef with the victim. So we know he didn't go out and kill these other people because we know the motivation behind the particular murder that we've made the arrest on. So yes, I think it's possible. It's quite possible that none of these are related, but it's also, maybe hopefully a faint possibility that some of them are related. Just to go back to something you said before, when do you think we would hear another announcement, perhaps development from the Massachusetts State Police? Is this a case where we probably won't hear a lot from them? A, because they're doing something behind the scenes. B, because they really aren't finding any connections and these are isolated incidents. When could we expect something? And even if they believe that there is no connection, would they come out and say that? Well, that's a really interesting question because of the current environment we're dealing in. So if obviously if another body is found and it makes the news and things like that, I think they'll feel compelled to come out and make a statement. The other thing is, in this current world we live in now, which is different than the past, is that how are they going to respond to the internet pressure? How are they going to respond to the internet catching fire on this? Say another body, turns up and they don't want to necessarily make any announcement. But the internet goes crazy about tying that to these others. They may feel compelled to come out and address the internet rumors. It's a new world for law enforcement to be operating with. We've always had pressure from the mayor and from the governor, sometimes from the White House on crimes. And I've faced some of that. But this is a new type of pressure being generated by the internet and by the viral nature of some of these stories. And so how law enforcement responds to that is kind of evolving. So it'll be interesting to see, whether or not they feel compelled to respond to the internet based on how crazy the internet gets with the rumors and speculation. I can appreciate that. I am curious. Do you think investigators are also looking into these social media groups, the conversation online, for two reasons? One, first of all, whatever we want to say, internet sleuths, people are interested in it. They could provide potentially valuable information or make connections that maybe law enforcement is not looking at. And B, is it possible that if there really is somebody who's responsible for multiple killings here, and I'm not suggesting that there is, but if it's possible, have you seen that perpetrator infiltrate themselves into the groups, become a member, see what the conversation is about? So do you think investigators are actually looking at the chatter online, studying it as part of the investigation? Well, you'd have to. And here's why. In my day, and I'm a dinosaur, I'm pre-computers, what you always had was you scanned. You scan the crowd that shows up at a crime beyond the police tape, right? You always saw these movies where the perpetrator is in the crowd. They're looking at their work that they did, right? They're looking at the police coming and going from the location where they committed a murder or set a fire or something like that. That's the old school version. The new school version of that is the social media. The killers are now coming onto social media to watch their work, to watch the effect they're having on getting everyone spun up, and they're also looking at the theories that everyone's throwing out there. They're consuming what the police are saying. So it's the old looking beyond the police line for your perpetrator in the crowd. Now you're looking at that social media crowd, and we have the FBI formed what we call SOMEX, which Almost every, I think, field office has one now, called the Social Media Exploitation Teams. And these are task forces with state and locals and police officers and detectives. And they are specialists at analyzing those things that you talked about, those social media chat boards and Facebook pages and things like that. And they have experts that can talk about language and look at posts and series of posts and things like that and determine whether or not we have our perpetrator beyond that electronic police line looking into the crime scene in this case, into these chat boards and things like that. Well, I'll tell you what, we're going to keep on top of it. We've been following it for a while. We'll see if there's any updates. We'll see if there's any announcements. And Bobby, really appreciate it. We love your perspective. You're not a dinosaur. Don't ever talk about my Bobby Chacon like that. But Bobby, great to see you. Thanks so much for taking the time. Thanks for having me, Jesse. Great seeing you. Hey guys, real quick little programming alert. I want to let you know that actually tonight on News Nation at 8 p.m. Eastern, I'm going to be hosting Cuomo. I hope you can tune in. We might actually take calls from viewers. So if you have questions about the true crime cases that we're covering here on Sidebar, would love to talk to you about it. But again, tune in tonight, 8 p.m. Eastern. I'll be hosting Cuomo. See you then on News Nation. And that's all we have for you right now here on Sidebar. Everybody, thank you so much for joining us, and as always, please subscribe on YouTube, Apple Podcast, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Jesse Weber. I'll speak to you next time.